my name is Christiane van Wijk. On 10-10-10 I attended an ayahuasca ceremony. South American shamans drink this mixture of plants to see through the veil of illusion. What I was shown in my experience led me to believe that humanity is stuck in a matrix. A matrix that doesn't just dissolve after death. It is one of the reasons for our endless reincarnation cycle. It was hard for me to determine who or what was keeping humanity enslaved like this. I was told by a guiding voice to go back into my body and do the only thing I and the rest of humanity can do. Expand our consciousness beyond the limiting boundaries of the matrix. I decided to find out more about what is really happening behind the scenes, like who is running the show, and what humanity can do to break free through the expansion of consciousness.
In the canonical Bible is Genesis chapter 6 verse 4, where it talks about the Elohim, which is a plural of gods and goddesses.
One of the Elohim decided that he wanted to take a people apart for his own purpose. And the Lord appeared unto him on the plains of Mamre, and he sat in the tent door out of the heat of the day, and he lifted his eyes up and looked, and lo, 3 men stood by him, and when he saw them, he ran to meet them from the tent and bowed himself toward the ground, and he said, "My Lord." So the 3 men appeared to Abraham, and he recognized him as the Lord, as the God that he'd been speaking to previously in chapter 17.
Who are these beings?
Well, I believe that they're extraterrestrials.
A being that was created out of the DNA of the Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came, and the hominoids that were indigenous to the planet.
There are a lot of people who believe that the Old Testament God is Satan.
If we actually look at the mythology from many places around the world, then humanity was created as a slave race. So one might argue that somewhere still in the DNA of humanity is this desire to be enslaved. Technology has been deliberately suppressed to enable humanity to be actually kept in enslavement. There is something that is driving an agenda to keep humanity in a subjugated state.
Who's really running the show? Voltaire's comment when he said, if you want to find out who rules you, ask yourself who you're not allowed to criticize.
The whole issue of enslavement is a theme that runs right through humanity's history.
As soon as you wake up and realize you have choice, is the first and maybe the strongest aha epiphany moment that you could have. They've been lying to you ever since you were born and before that.
I feel like I've got free speech, but not real freedom.
Yes and no.
We're pretty free to make whatever we want of the world and our place in it.
Pretty much.
As free as one can be.
Absolutely not.
Probably not.
The whole idea of property ownership, owning a house and then being forever in debt to a financial institution.
The evidence of what we see is very clear, and that is that there is a power that is very controlling, and people who are drawn into that power become socio-psychopathic in their behavior, and their agenda is incredibly selfish.
And the things that psychopaths don't possess, that normal human beings do, empathy and creativity.
If you take a religion, when you read the story of Jesus, it's a beautiful story. You read some of the stories in the Bible, they're beautiful stories. The story of Muhammad are beautiful stories. They start off as spiritual directions, as a good moral codes, but what happens is they grow into monsters. It's the same with businesses. You know, when these businesses start out, they start out as ethical, good intentions, but they turn into monsters. And one of the problems is that 5% of humanity have got a psychopathic brain set. They can't help it, that's the way they're wired up. And these people are ruthless, they're unemotional, they're devoid of emotion, they're charming, but they're on an agenda. And they will walk over everyone and anyone to get where they're going to get to, and they tend to accumulate in positions of power, in corporations, in politics, and in religions.
Corporate psychopath, charming and enchanting when you first meet them, but are ultimately shallow and have few meaningful, long-lasting relationships. They crave money and power and are willing to sabotage, intimidate, manipulate, steal, defame, lie and cheat shamelessly without guilt. Throughout ancient history, more specifically, cultures have identified this kind of thing that we now call psychopaths. They used to be called archons. The Native Americans called them serpent spirits, and they were capable of taking possession of people's bodies and minds. And what's so funny is that the modern definition of psychopathy and all the desires and the things that they actually want from people is exactly, almost identical to what the ancient cultures describe as either demons or dark gods or something of that nature. You'd be surprised how easy it is to get away with things if you simply deny doing them. You know, that's often all that people need. About roughly 30% of people will believe everything that they're told without needing any evidence. And about 30% of people will need a bit of evidence, and incidentally that's the 30% that don't vote. So you've got about 70% of people who are complete idiots who continue to vote for people who are committing scumbaggery and deny that they're committing scumbaggery. When you're talking about the psychopathic condition, they actually believe their own lies, and it's been shown in studies with lie detector tests that psychopaths do not actually give off those signals. Sweaty palms, increased heart rate, movement of the eyes from side to side. These are things that ordinary people who have things like empathy, creativity, we can't hide those things without significant amounts of training. This is why cult leaders are particularly powerful. They seem to be able to not only lie to people, but lie to them so convincingly that they will love being lied to, and they will give up the things that they value most in their life, including their family, their wealth, and their resources, in order to become part of a cult. Now, that's an extreme example, but the exact same symptoms of psychopathy that you would see in any kind of religious crazed cult, you can see the exact same kind of pattern forming within politics and politicians.
I was part of the team that was putting together the resources that were used to fight deal with the oil fires in Kuwait in 1991. But that was a very significant trigger for me in absolutely acknowledging that the way the world actually functioned was not as most people comprehend. Schlumberger was working in both Iraq and Iran during the Iran-Iraq War. I mean, Schlumberger prided itself in not being tied to a nation state. It was a truly transnational corporation. And so the fact that there were two nation states knocking 7 barrels of hell out of each other, well, you know, it wasn't really our concern, was it? I mean, our concern was effectively providing the needs for the client company working in those countries. And today I would sort of consider that to be a sort of borderline cognitive dissonance. You know, literally burying your head in the sand to the reality of what's going on around you.
Did you do that as well?
Yes. And in fact, I used to half jest when I was recruiting people to work in the industry, and I made the observation that if you have any interest in geopolitics, then this is not the industry for you. You know, you literally had to put the blinkers on and just get on with the job. When you've got a very healthy salary check coming into the bank every month, which is keeping you and your family in a lifestyle to which they've become accustomed, then it would seem that shutting yourself off from that reality is a small price to pay. But in reality, it's a very big price to pay, because really you are effectively part of the problem. You are effectively culpable in what is unfolding. The bubble was burst, if you like, when I was traveling around the southern oil fields with a military driver and some other colleagues from other companies, and we were looking at the logistics that we were going to need to bring to bear to be able to deal with this unprecedented firestorm. I mean, it was 620 odd wells, I think it was, that were out of control. What I saw was obviously a lot of burning wells, but in foxholes around the wells were young Iraqi conscripts with bullet holes in the backs of their neck. My observation was that, hang on a second, we're supposed to believe that these guys set wells alight and then jumped back in the foxholes and shot themselves in the back of the neck. It doesn't make sense. So I happened to sort of think out loud and said, this is outrageous. Clearly something else happened here. And a couple of days later, I had a visit from a US military personnel with no markings on his fatigues. And he came up to me in the mess of the Kuwaiti Oil Company's offices in Akamadi, and he knew who I was. He walked straight over to me and he said, "You're Ian Crane?" And I didn't say anything. He said, "I've been hearing you've been casting some aspersion about who set them wells alight." And I still didn't say anything. And he said, "Boy," he said, "that's the kind of thinking that can get you in a whole lot of trouble, and you best be keeping your mouth shut." What I had seen led me to believe that the fires had been started by US Special Forces. And of course, people's immediate reaction is, well, why would they do that? What would they have to gain from that? Well, actually, it worked perfectly, because the whole objective was to demonize Saddam Hussein and Iraq in the eyes of the rest of the world. And the reason was twofold. Number one was to keep Iraqi oil off of the global market, because Iraq was not part of OPEC. And the concern was that Saddam would drop the price of oil and effectively undermine the whole global energy market. And the other part of it was that Iraq was outside of the central banking system. The Rothschilds controlled central banking system, and they wanted to force Iraq into the system. And of course, Saddam kept Iraq out of the central banking system right through until 2003, when Bush and Blair launched their illegal war on Iraq.
Name me a bureaucrat that is really creative and totally changing everything all the time. They don't exist.
Well, and if they did, they were killed, weren't they?
Either that or they just don't get promoted through the ranks.
Right, yeah.
One of the things throughout history that you see that has been akin to the rule of psychopaths, whether that be crazy Roman emperors or domineering royalties and things of that nature, which have gone nuts all throughout history. History is just this long list of psychos getting control of massive empires and then imposing hierarchical structures so that everybody has to follow all these stupid rules the whole way down, and so that nobody even questions the rules that they have to follow, and they go out and follow the orders of a psychopath who didn't even come up with the orders himself because he's not that creative, And people wonder why the world is crazy. And imagine for a moment that I told you the world is run by crazy people. Does it suddenly make a lot of sense why the world seems so crazy? Yeah.
And it gave me the opportunity to have a unique insight into the corporate control of the US and the way in which the corporatocracy has the nation in an absolute stranglehold.
What psychopaths are really, really good at, even on the understanding of modern psychology, is knowing exactly what you desire, exactly what you want. First meet you, and I'm going to tell you this, that, and the other, and everything's going to be so wonderful, and you're never going to have to worry about it. I'm going to make all your dreams come true. They gotcha.
Those who believe themselves to be the rightful rulers of a planetary fiefdom Their definition of sustainability is sustaining their global dominion.
So essentially what's happening here at the moment is governments are telling us what to do through corporate-controlled media, and corporate-controlled media is telling us what to do through governments. It's a vicious cycle where there's a pyramid, and at the top of the pyramid there's a few people saying, hey, this is what's going on. And by the time you get to the bottom, you've got all these people that are running around like headless chickens not knowing what to do. So if you turn off your TV and stop listening to corporate media and start critically thinking about everything that you read, then you're going to start stepping into the right process.
And this is why hierarchical structures are really, really handy if you're a psychopathic scumbag. Because, hey, if anybody threatens your dominance, you have X amount of layers that you have to go through in order to get to whoever's at the top.
Everything that we see unfolding right now is actually very well documented in a document that goes way back beyond 2000. It was actually published in 1932. And it's a document that's called Technocracy, Inc. The earliest version that I have found of the blueprint of everything that's unfolding now to keep humanity literally locked into a total control grid. Zbigniew Brzezinski actually picked up on Technocracy Inc. Now, I don't know exactly at what point, but certainly by 1969. And I think his trigger was a report that came into the public domain in 1967, which was called the Report from Iron Mountain. Now, we don't know the exact origins of this Report from Iron Mountain. We don't know who participated in it. Some people dismiss it as a forgery. Well, let me tell you, it was a pretty damn good forgery if it was a forgery. But it was presented as a think tank document, and the think tank were tasked with looking at ways to control large populations without having a threat of thermonuclear war hanging over them. Okay. And so this think tank was put together in 1963 in the immediate aftermath of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And this is the first reference, by the way, that I can find to things like global warming, climate change, drought, famine, all of which can be used as tools to control a population as an alternative to fear of thermonuclear war.
Again, fear.
If you want somebody to abandon their reasoning processes, to abandon their conscience, make them feel afraid.
Yeah.
On the physical plane, they're doing a very, very good job of actuating their Depop agenda, aren't they? Depop agenda is depopulation agenda, which is called for, prescribed, and strategized for, and has been for a long, long time.
Doesn't bother me.
I don't really mind as long as it's like for safety reasons.
If it's for a good cause, then it's all right.
I don't like it. I enjoy my privacy. Ooh.
It doesn't bother me. I think it's necessary.
I'm not really too keen on the whole idea.
We should have our own private life, and we shouldn't have people intervening at every step of the way.
I think there unfortunately are people out there perhaps who need to be monitored for the rest of our good.
Fuck no, it's bullshit.
What New Zealand is doing, together with the other Five Eyes nations, is to attempt to create a new structure of civilization. And I don't think that New Zealanders agreed to take part in such a radical, extremist project of putting all the foreign, at least, telecommunications of New Zealanders under a mass surveillance regime which automatically collects information on every single person. I think that is an extreme, bizarre, Orwellian future that has been constructed secretly. We shouldn't look at the Five Eyes and the activities of the National Security Agency in isolation. This is part of a broader hegemonic agenda by these institutions, not by the United States, but by these institutions that operate in an anti-democratic way and the networks of power associated with them. Coupled together with mass surveillance is an extraterritorial move to apply certain aspects of US law to as many countries as possible. So, for example, why am I being investigated by a grand jury in the United States now for the past 4.5 years, and some of my staff as well? How is that possible? I'm not an American citizen. We don't have a company registration in the United States. Well, because we publish US government documents, and that is the claim jurisdictionality, which these groups operating out of Washington are going to apply coercive force to me and my staff in the rest of the world.
Even if you trust this government, history shows that when a government becomes empowered with the control of information, it will ultimately turn against its own citizens.
So another part of this agenda is smart meters, which are being put into your house that will literally monitor every single transaction. It'll monitor when you take the milk out of the fridge. Eventually it'll monitor how much milk you use when you take the milk out of the fridge, so that you can literally be profiled through every single action. I mean, we think we're not predictable perhaps, and yet these smart devices have algorithms built into them for their predictive text based on your texting style. So when your predictive text comes up, it's using the history that you've created to offer alternatives on the next word you might use. Now that's just something noddy like a smartphone. Imagine what that can be done, or what could be done with that, when it's put into the macro.
The Prime Minister, in the words of the New Zealand Herald, for the very first time admitted that his government had in fact planned a program of mass surveillance aimed at New Zealanders. And I don't make that accusation lightly. As a journalist, I understand that I can't go around making those kind of claims and maintaining my credibility unless I have the evidence to back it up, and that it's absolutely true. And in this case, I can categorically and with great confidence say that it is. I think and have been very honest about the fact that mass surveillance is a serious menace to all sorts of important political values.
When I was doing this, I would see the communications of individuals from around the world. I could be looking at a system in Japan. I could be looking at a system in Germany. I could be looking at a system in New Zealand. And what was incredible was the fact that I could see records of the communications of people around the world from every country comprehensively.
I think it's some sort of internet fraud or something.
A solution to something that isn't particularly sensible, like what many other solutions that we've come up with as humans that don't work.
Problems with it are somewhat over-exaggerated.
Just another get-rich-quick for a whole lot of unscrupulous miners, I think.
I think it needs further investigation.
People need to realise a country needs to be run like a business. You can't get left behind in the world, and if you want to make money, you need to use your resources.
I have very negative feelings about that.
Exploitation of unconventional gas involves pumping millions of gallons of a mixture containing water, sand and chemicals at pressures of up to 15,000 pounds per square inch into the target geology to fracture the rock and release the trapped gas. This is known as hydraulic fracturing or fracking. Approximately 40% what is pumped down the well is actually recovered. Where that gas and fluids escape to cannot be totally controlled.
This is my home up here on Crawberry Hill. It's actually it's been my home since January, when it was donated to me by somebody who saw me doing a live broadcast from my tent on Barton Moss in Manchester. This is an industry, the unconventional gas industry, that has left an absolute trail of devastation wherever it has been unleashed. And although it's classified as a novel industry in the UK, there's nothing novel about it, because we have 20 years of experience of this industry from the US, from Canada, and much more recently, of course, from Australia. And the evidence of the damage, the contamination to water, soil, air, the impact on people's health is absolutely horrendous. One well that has been drilled and subjected to a full frack, and that was at Priest Hall over the other side of the country near Blackpool in 2011, and that resulted in 2 minor seismic events, one on April 1st and the following one on May 27th, which resulted in some 80 properties being damaged. François Hollande, the president of France, and he upheld the presidential ban on hydraulic fracturing that was imposed by his predecessor, Sarkozy. But a Texan company called Stuttbach took the French government to court and tried to get that presidential ban lifted, but the courts upheld the presidential ban. You know, it doesn't work. The only thing that is proven is that it causes horrendous contamination of the water table, the soils, the air. It has a horrendous impact on the health of the people who live close by and those who live downwind.
And this is proven?
Absolutely. I mean, the evidence is irrefutable. Well, eventually, of course, what they will look for in the EU is what they call harmonization. And you know, those countries that are opposing it right now will be forced, potentially, to allow hydraulic fracturing in their territory. I mean, the countries that are strongest against fracking right now, interestingly, are the two countries very much at the heart of the EU, and that's Germany and France. Elsewhere, there is an enormous pressure to get this industry up and running. In the US, the water is being sucked out of the Great Lakes, the Great River System, and the great aquifers under the western states. People who live in the western states are having their lives destroyed. In Australia, the Great Artesian Basin is being sucked dry at a rate 6 times greater than it can naturally replenish. Here in the UK, if this industry kicks off, within a generation, the UK will be uninhabitable. And this whole deal of demonizing Russia and using, of course, the Ukraine crisis to facilitate this. The whole Ukraine crisis is, of course, manipulated. Totally manipulated. It's manipulated by those who believe themselves to be the rightful rulers of a planetary fiefdom. And you know, the real target of this is Russia. And the reason being is that Putin has done an amazing job, of course, of gaining significant independence from the global banking establishment. And now they want to try to destroy his economy. And Russia, of course, does export gas into Eastern Europe and into Germany. The US unconventional gas industry has drilled something in the region of 500,000 wells in the last decade. And now they have a surplus of gas. So the US is desperate to find an export market for this surplus gas. And by forcing the EU to implement sanctions against Russia and stop importing gas from Russia, of course, what the US is doing is shutting off that gas market from Russia and saying, well, you know, buy ours.
And if a country that is a trading partner of the United States does not behave according to US standards, a Section 301 listing can be made, which impacts their ability to continue to work with the United States. It is a coercive form of listing which has forced many countries, including Sweden and European countries, to aggressively change their IP laws and other cultural related laws to allow them to continue the type of access they believe they need to the US market. We are in a period of moral entrepreneurship. Large corporations are criminalizing what they see as violations. For instance, infringement disputes that were heretofore civil in nature have been criminalized so that the power of the state can be directed against individuals.
It's the plan that's been action for the last, 200 years or so, gradually and now with increasing virulence and efficiency to control everybody, B, get rid of a lot of people that won't or don't, are useless eaters, shall we say, which is a term that was coined by Henry Kissinger. You know, total global fascism.
The one thing that everybody has in common is they need water. They need fresh water.
The fluoride that's put into drinking water is a chemical that is scrubbed out of the chimneys of the phosphate fertiliser industry. So it's a chemical that's too toxic to go into the air because it pollutes everything around it. So there's laws in every country not to let the fluoride escape out of the chimneys. So they scrub it out of the chimneys and it gets washed out into sort of like big holding ponds like you see on Erin Brockovich, and then it's carted away into tanks and put into the water supply. The reason given is that they say that it reduces dental decay, but really when people look at the scientific evidence, there's nothing to really substantiate that. It's never right to force things onto people when they don't want it, and to put something in a public water supply is a huge thing to do. In fact, you can't do anything more than put something into a water supply because it affects everybody and you have no idea how it's going to affect people, how they're responding to it, what dose they're getting.
It's not like prescribing a medication to somebody on the basis that they need it and using a specific dose. How much fluoride somebody will get through a fluoridated water supply depends on how much water they drink.
What about all the people with thyroid dysfunction these days? I mean, it's such a huge growing disease. Is that because we know now that really low levels of fluoride affect the thyroid? This is stuff about the lowering of IQ.
So I did an interview yesterday with one of the world's authorities on iodine and the thyroid, and we discussed things like IQ. Something as simple as the mother having enough iodine and iodide in her system can improve the baby's IQ substantially. If she's depleted in iodine, it reduces the IQ by about average of 12 points.
Do you believe that fluoride in the water lowers iodine?
Fluoride in the waters can be a very dangerous problem. I understand from a dentist's perspective, they see benefits for the teeth, but teeth are only a minor part of the body, and there are many other ways of treating that. The body needs iodine to soak up the halides, and fluoride, bromide, and the chlorides. Chlorides are in cleaning products and toxins like the agrochemical type toxins. Bromide's in a lot of upholstery and carpets and things like that. And the fluoride, of course, in the water. And these are dangerous halides in the wrong solution.
There's something like 35 published studies from China, India and Iran saying that fluoride does lower IQ. I mean, we know that bottle-fed babies have on average, so you know, if we're not talking about every bottle-fed baby, but on average, they have about a 5-point lower IQ than breastfed babies. Now, people tend to think, oh, it's because of the omega-3s or this, that and the other that's in the breast milk. But I've wondered, is it because of what's not in the breast milk? Because no matter how much fluoride the mother has, she screens it out of the breast milk.
Children exposed to higher levels of fluoride end up with measurable declines in IQ. Not necessarily the levels to which children are exposed through water fluoridation, if it's controlled and they manage to keep the fluoride level to what is the aim in New Zealand. But the problem is once you start fluoridating water, that is one uncontrolled dose of fluoride that a child receives that can end up to be neurotoxic quite quickly. And if you're a bottle-fed baby, unfortunately, your fluoride dose can easily end up in the unsafe level if your parents are making up your formula with fluoridated water.
10 milligrams a day for 10 years or more will cause stage 2 or stage 3 of a thing called skeletal fluorosis. So you see people in India and China all bent over with this disfiguring disease, and they know that's from too much fluoride. Now, the thing is, because it's accumulative and the fluoride's accumulating in our body, what about 5 milligrams a day for 20 years, you know, or 2.5 milligrams a day for 40 years? And the thing is, nobody knows. In the first stage of skeletal fluorosis, the symptoms are exactly the same as arthritis. And at the moment, we have, you know, pandemics of arthritis in fluoridating countries. There was a good study done in about 1995 which showed that it increased ADHD. This was a good study on rats and by Phyllis Mullinux, and she found that when they gave fluoride to the rats prenatally, they became hyperactive when they were born, and when they were given it postnatally, they became like couch potatoes.
Water for health is seriously important because 80% of your body, the thoughts, the traumas and the toxins all go into the water
Makes so much sense.
holographically. So that means they go into the waters of every cell in the body, not just the kidney, the liver, wherever.
When they were using fluoride to actually experimentally keep people quiescent in concentration camps. And they've known it's a carcinogen. They've known that the treatments for cancer that they use, chemotherapy, are themselves carcinogenic. They've known that. They're not stupid, they're just satanic.
It's quite dangerous not to have them for children.
I haven't had my own children, and I'm quite grateful that I haven't had to make that decision.
I think you just got to go with the medical advice at the moment.
I come from a very healthy family of people who haven't vaccinated.
It's very important that everyone should vaccinate their babies and should vaccinate themselves.
The first one got a little bit, the first lot done had a really bad reaction, and since then none of them have been done, no.
It's a classic example of the sort of the demonisation process that can happen if you're an honest doctor, is what happened to Dr. Andrew Wakefield when he and his colleagues first presented a case series of children who had been previously developing normally and then developed regressive autism, often with bowel disease. They basically said, you know, this is a concern. We need further research to see if there is a link between this particular vaccine and regressive autism and bowel disease. If you're a parent, you wouldn't argue with that. If you're a multinational pharmaceutical company who makes huge amounts of money from an MMR vaccine and stands to lose a lot of money if parents begin to believe that it's unsafe, you will argue. People who are familiar with Dr. Wakefield's story will know that he lost his job at the Royal Free Hospital in London. There was essentially a media beat-up against him, which accused him of fraud. And the pressure on them was so great that most of the doctors involved in that paper recanted. And Dr. Wakefield refused to recant because he said, and quite rightly if you read the paper, you know, I never claimed that the MMR vaccine caused autism and bowel disease. I just said that it needed to be investigated. He stuck his heels in and refused to be bullied, and you know, consequently he lost his medical licence.
Feed more people, especially in the areas where people don't have a lot of food, then that's fantastic.
It's not natural.
50-50.
It may save the world. I agree with that.
Don't like the idea of it. I think natural is better.
Well, I do eat seedless watermelon, and I'm pretty sure that's genetically modified.
Why would we fight what created us, you know?
GMO, genetically modified organisms. The Māori have a word for life force, the Māori of things. And GMO is a way of tampering with that Māori.
Essentially, genetic engineering is a process whereby a virus is used as a carrier medium to insert genes from one species into an unrelated species.
You're actually tampering with the genetic codes. You're splicing in genes where genes naturally and by a course of evolution are changing. Maybe perhaps, you know, you might get what they call a sport in the area of orcharding, which is like, whoa, how did that apple get there? The tree, just by happenstance, by the very nature of its interaction with the environment, some weird quirk of nature has just done this. They've given us a new apple, but no human has tampered with it.
Species barriers, if you like, have been historically and ecologically very well defined. You know, you don't get hybrids between tomatoes and flounders, for example.
Perhaps a gene from a fish into a tomato, or, you know, a crossing of the kingdoms, which absolutely by nature does not happen. We humans think we're intelligent and playing God.
You can patent genetically modified seeds.
And you cannot ever collect seed and save seed and grow true to type seed that comes from genetically modified food. So, and they even put a terminator gene in, so that guarantees it. So that means that you don't have control over your seed source, you don't have control over your food.
If you look at the funding of different studies on GMOs, you'll find that those which were financed by industry tend not to show a problem, whereas those which have been undertaken by independent scientists generally do show a problem. And one of the most sort of famous of those was feeding rats on a genetically engineered Roundup Ready soybean. The poor things, I mean, the photos are virtually unbelievable in terms of the tumours that these rats developed.
Animals that are fed with GMO corn or GMO grain and not, they will automatically go to the organic or the non-GMO. They will leave that behind. So how does it physically affect us? It debilitates our life force. Our cells have a really hard time absorbing it because it's like treated like a foreign body, which it is. And so basically it's illness causing and cancer causing. And there's evidence to back this up, but the evidence is basically, buried, not let come to light, and that does, though people lose their jobs, so, and maybe have their lives threatened. So it's very much in the interests of big business that is funding and getting funded and getting the buy-in by pressure from farmers who are planting these things, and once they've planted they can't go back again, the soil's contaminated, and the seed source is going to keep growing, that kind of. So they are basically ruined. The suicides of farmers in India that have taken on a GMO regime at the expense of their own traditional, hundreds and hundreds of years crops is alarming.
You can connect the GMOs to the chemtrails, not a problem. You can connect it to the intensifying degrees of radiation. You can connect it to the suppression of all truthful stories that are meaningful in major media. You can connect it to Fukushima. You can connect it to the vaccines that they're putting into your little babies here.
And these are the times we're living in, those wild, tumultuous times when we as humans have really upset the equilibrium of the earth. And, as a responsive being, our Earth Mother is just wild.
You, cameraman, when we weren't filming, said you think anything that's classified as a pest is a bit sad, right? Anyway, so they call things a pest when there's too many of them, and so we're a pest, right? Cameraman?
I agree.
We're a pest.
Human beings are a disease, a cancer of this planet. You are a plague.
When you think in a linear, just A to B to C way, you can't think holistically. So we've lost our ability and our mental formatting as a society to think and see holistically. So it's actually how we view the world. And if you view the world as a continuum in a sort of spiral way, in a cyclic way that we learn from nature by living with and observing nature, then there's no way you can not think in an integrated way. So, yeah, we separated ourselves off to cope and function in this very fast track and very dysfunctional society. We separate ourselves from that, and so we don't have the ability to think common sense anymore.
How does that make you feel?
The word that comes to me, it's tragic.
Throughout my filming journey, I'm starting to slowly realize that the more we are out of harmony with nature, the more our minds get trapped in our matrix illusion. As our minds get sicker, so do our bodies and planet Earth.
Well, illness is a state of getting out of balance with the rest of the cosmos or the universe, and which is very well designed and architectured. It's a highly intelligent living system, and if we work in balance with that, then we experience wellness and good health. If we swim against the tide, so to say, it leads to all forms of what we call disease or illness.
Illness starts on a metaphysical level, some angst within the person deep down, feeling of shame, guilt, insecurity, not knowing their place in the world, not knowing how to stand on their own 2 feet. Then mental anguish, panic, fear, shame, guilt, uncertainty, anxiety. And then that eventually will translate into some sort of physical illness. So what we find when we treat effectively is that often as the disease heals, we get an emotional catharsis. And so because I've seen that so many times, I know in my own self that to really heal, we need to look at the spiritual aspects of a person.
A lot of my patients were coming to me with cancer, having tried all the conventional therapies and nothing having worked for them, and in a terminal state. Generally, I could give them some help. Usually, I couldn't save their lives. It's very difficult being the proverbial ambulance at the bottom of the cliff.
We tend to have an ambulance at the bottom of the cliff mentality, which is extremely expensive and is very destructive to our social systems. And it also means we're not looking after our environment properly.
It's reflected outwards.
It's reflected outwards, and it's reflected outward through relationships and breakdowns in society in various ways, and reflected outward and damaging. We've damaged most of our water systems of the world. We've damaged our air systems with pollution. We've destroyed most of the world's soil in the last 150 years. Our food's depleted in nutrition. Drugs through the mainstream system are enormously expensive to develop, and they tend to create a lot of side effects that in many cases don't work. They only give about 2 to 3% extra performance above a placebo effect, which is free. Things like dementia and diabetes and obesity and things like that are just going out of control, and the mainstream system doesn't know how to cope with them particularly well. A lot of the medical system was set up for the military. You can understand why military had a budget, and the security of nations depended on the strength of their military. So they got very good at things like operations and managing acute conditions, accidents, things like that. It hasn't changed much. The mainstream medical system is not effective with chronic disease. Dementia may well bankrupt the Western world if we don't immediately start to deal with it more proactively.
What's causing this?
Well, it's imbalance of the hormones, and this is why I spoke about iodine in the thyroid before, because that's your master gland, and that helps to manage and regulate a lot of your hormone systems. The other important thing in relation to that is the adrenal system. And that's your energy and immunity gland, and then the adrenals control or regulate about 50 hormones. So between the adrenals and the thyroid, it's actually really, really simple and very cost effective to help people deal with the majority of their health issues. Then if you treat the gut as well, and because the majority of the cells in the body are in the gut, 90% of the cells in your body are bacteria or bacteria-related cells, and they're primarily in your gut.
Did you know that there are over 100 trillion biotica called the bionome that live in our gut, and they mitigate all cell metabolism. They're cofactors in producing enzymes which break down our food, and they are called good and bad bacterium that live in our bionome. Yeast and fungus, when a yeast turns to a fungus, the next stage is a cancer. So when you're eating sugar and you're eating processed food, it not only feeds the Candida albicans, which you get all these bacteria when you're born from your mother's milk and when you come through the vaginal passage. So cesarean kids might be more susceptible to immune problems. The bionome creates the chemical soup for all cell metabolism, for nervous function, and essentially for immunity. And immunity is a huge topic. Dear to my heart, I'm getting tingles, but immunity is something we inherit from our mom, and we get from our environment by getting down and eating dirt and being in with life. And we've been given anti-life, antibiotics. We've been That whole process has been taken away from us.
Diet. Now, you know, I mean, I'm not, totally committed, you know, to a healthy diet because my lifestyle, you know, on the front line of the anti-fracking community doesn't actually lend itself to that. But it's make the effort. You know, it's stay away from the junk food. I mean, you're not going to find me at a McDonald's or a Burger King or a KFC, you know, anytime soon. Watch what you're drinking. You know, I mean, even bottled water, some of the bottled water has fluoride in it. Work in terms of looking after your health. You know, we're using natural medicines, which are about prevention rather than cure, which is why the pharmaceutical industry is desperate to shut them down.
Stimulants like coffee and sugar and processed foods, and especially dairy and wheat, are so irritating to the gut lining.
You look at a lot of reptiles and they sit on a rock and feed themselves, and they sit on a rock and they feed themselves, and that's what they do. And that's what happens to people in a general term whose adrenals are depleted to a certain level. Then their immunity starts to drop and disease starts to seep in. So we treated hundreds and hundreds of people for cancer, and we tend to be very successful with a lot of our programs, which are, you know, balanced nutritional, holistic programs, mind, body, and mindfulness and things like that related. But I don't think I've met a single person with cancer who hasn't had an adrenal problem to start with. So again, you've got to understand how the adrenal system works, the fact that it controls or regulates 50 other hormones, and that it has an enormous amount of impact on the ability to use your brain effectively, and the types of way you use your brain, which are either at a survival or a thrival priority. Everybody's got cancer, everybody. And even a newborn child's got cancer, but the immune system tends to take care of it. And this is, again, understanding the intelligence behind the system that we live in.
Nutrition is one of the key elements to healing the body, but the body is actually a vehicle of consciousness, and it heals itself given the right environment.
You know, I mean, if you're looking at drug companies' motivations, again, you're talking about corporations which are established for the purposes of making money. And I remember a famous quote, I can't remember who said it, but they said there's more money in searching for a cure for cancer than there is for actually finding it. And there are huge numbers of drugs for cancer on the market, and many of them are very expensive. The new ones are very expensive. As the old ones get old, of course, they're no longer patented, so they're not so expensive. Tobacco companies would fund research which was designed not to show a problem, and then publish it, and then trumpet the results loudly through multimedia channels.
You know, if you were to follow a busy doctor as he makes his daily round of calls, you'd find yourself having a mighty busy time keeping up with him. Time out for many men of medicine usually means just long enough to enjoy a cigarette. And because they know what a pleasure it is to smoke a mild, good-tasting cigarette, they're particular about the brand they choose.
In 1999, 1 in 2,000 children were being diagnosed with conscious disorders such as ADHD, autism, Asperger's. Last year, a survey came out showed 1 in 30 children are now being diagnosed with these disorders. They are erratic mind syndrome. You can label them any way you like, but they are one thing, erratic mind syndrome. These children are showing us something, okay? They're showing us to stop being erratic of our own minds. And I've proven it in a few cases in autistic homes where I've put certain things into those homes and gave parents certain things to do, and those children calm right down. But I'm not calming the children down, I'm calming the parents down. It has nothing to do with the children. And everyone offloads on that the child's the problem or this person's the problem. You stick a child like that in a mall where all the mind is, and they start to flip out and break down and they can't manage themselves.
They're labels, and the labels weren't there before. And it isn't a disease, it isn't something you can have. It is a description of symptoms that sometimes fit more or less with people.
Yeah, so give them Ritalin. You know, give them a drug that, you know, will literally turn them into zombies. You know, anybody who shows any kind of individuality is effectively being demonized.
These children that are a bit more restless are taught that they are no good, and they get E's and C's and D's and never A's and B's. So we deliver them at 12 at secondary agency, and the only thing we taught them is that school sucks, big time.
I saw a graphic recently which was a barcode, and it was showing humanity's evolution of the tribe through to individuality, and then the loss of features, the loss of individuality into the pure barcode. And that's exactly what is happening right now.
A Ritalin or Concerta, if you have this kind of personality structure or this tendency, it helps you to focus. And part of the medication helps you to relax your muscles. Like me, I'm also quite a, I'm also quite a, you know, I have 30 things in my head. But two of them might be very creative and different from the rest of the thoughts that you have. Like, okay, I have to get to the shop to buy milk. But it also might be an idea for a better workshop tomorrow for the children. So if you have many thoughts in your head and you're restless and you can't concentrate on a boring task for long, that might mean, I don't say it always means, but it might mean that you're quite creative.
Homeschooled kids think a lot more outside of the square because they haven't gone into a system at 5 and being told how to think and what to draw and what to write.
Try to teach children how to read. It's never relevant to them. If you're very much interested in reptiles, you never get during reading time books about reptiles. Why? Because if you want to read comics or reptiles or whatever things, then you're reading and then you're practicing how to read. So why are we acting so complicated?
The public schooling system was created by Prussia pre-World War I, and they had a war with France and they beat them resoundingly. And the French found out that it was because the Prussians had a public schooling system which actually taught children and tore them away from their parents at a very young age and then forcibly indoctrinated them to love their country. The rest of the world saw the resounding success that the Prussian Empire had against the French, and soon thereafter every single major Western country developed a public schooling system. And directly after that, World War I happened, the world's largest ever war, called the Great War, which everybody agreed was so terrible and so painful to bear and so destructive that they vowed to never have another one again. And then public education got bigger. And later on, a guy called Adolf Hitler came along who was very, very staunch about getting people into public education, about giving everybody free education and teaching them to, again, love their state, to the point where they thought, you know, it'd be a really good idea, bro, let's have another war.
They are curious and they want to master the world. They want to be a king of the world because that's their age. And normally that is till you're 24 or so. So why kill that? And we have a boy who was trying to do the same here, and they do exactly opposite of what they're supposed to do. So you know then as a teacher that they are very much aware of what they should do. So they're very smart in that, but they do exactly the opposite. So why should that be? That is, the frame is too confined for the child.
Particularly for my children, I could see early that they were very creative. They were thinking outside the square. They were really in touch with the world. And unfortunately, in a school system, they have to work to national standards, which is put there from a government. And the teachers don't have the space to explore with them that kind of teaching, because they have to be able to read at 6 and they have to be able to do this kind of maths, which is just nonsense.
You have some people, you know, pressured into sort of choosing a career path when they're very young, before they've got any life experience, you know, pressured into choosing certain career paths simply because it will provide financial security.
Financial security to keep well adjusted to the profoundly disharmonious situation we find ourselves in today within the matrix we all collectively accept as real. And all that through a piece of paper with a number written on it.
Well, money first was invented as a means of exchange. Before money came around, people used to barter for goods and services.
If you had a cow, you could swap it for a goat or a pig. If you already had a goat or a pig, barter started to get a little bit clumsy. Barter became precious metal. They started with gold, which was a rare commodity and valued and precious. It was risky to carry gold with you because you could get robbed. So gold merchants set themselves up to hold people's gold in exchange for a piece of paper that says, "This represents 20 pieces of gold." Over time, the paper became more widely used than the gold. Not many people came to pick up their gold in exchange for the paper notes. Gold merchants decided it was more profitable to print money and put that into circulation. Over time, pieces of paper began to represent gold. It will say, "I promise to pay the bearer the amount of $10. It's basically a promissory note. Because there was only a finite amount of gold in the vault, there could only be a finite amount of paper in circulation. The gold merchant realized he could make money by simply circulating the paper. Say, I've only got 100 bars of gold in my vault, and there's a need for 150 equivalent items of paper money. So he started to charge a premium on the money. If you want this money, you'll have to pay me a certain proportion. For example, a businessman asked a merchant for money to buy another ship for his trade. The merchant said, "Sure, I will lend you the equivalent of 100 bars of gold, but you will have to pay me for the benefit of having that money."
And the gold merchant was making money first off by printing the money that represented the gold, and then by charging interest. And interest back then was seen as a sin. In fact, the Catholic Church outlawed the charging of interest, calling it usury, for over 1,000 years. You would be excommunicated from the church if you charged interest on the money that you lent out. And that's where the Jewish merchants came into their own, because the Jewish merchants didn't worry if they got excommunicated from the Catholic Church because it wasn't their religion. And so after a while, the church realized that there was a certain amount of money to be had in interest, and so the excommunication curse was removed. 300 or 400 years ago, the only person who could issue notes and coins was the sovereign, the king, the queen, or the government of the time. And that exists right now in New Zealand. Only the government can print our money. The problem is that money creation has now gone digital. It's all electronic. And so while banks cannot create the notes and coins in your wallet, they only form 2% of the actual money in circulation. The rest is digital money. And that money is created by the banks. The banks can create money simply by typing numbers into a spreadsheet. So the banks decide where the money gets invested. And it's very, very profitable for them to put a lot of money into housing, because if you can't repay the mortgage, they will simply take the house off you, conduct a mortgagee sale, and get their money back that way. In the 1960s and 70s, and you could buy a house and pay it off in about 10 to 12 years. Now, they're talking about paying off 50-year mortgages, 60-year mortgages, and that's the problem. People will be in debt for their entire life.
This young couple in Pembrokeshire who've been, they've got to demolish their beautiful little hobbit hole, a straw bale house. In the Daily Express, they portray the tragedy of these young people not being able to live on their own land, in their own house that they've built. It's because the house cost them £12,500 to build and not £250,000 worth of debt, because the system has got us in economic slavery. We've been as slaves on this island since William the Conqueror. There's always a system trying to milk us.
The idea of a few people or banks having control over our money supply sounds ridiculous, because they essentially can direct the way the economy goes. They will establish how much cost of houses are, and those that have that sort of power will get very rich. And those that don't, the money will be sucked out of the productive economy, which is where goods and services are produced, and siphoned off into the financial economy to pay interest and the like. So The rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Even the middle class today is struggling with the cost of housing, rents and the like. As soon as you deposit your wages or any money, it becomes the property of the bank. You are an unsecured creditor to the bank, and the bank can do anything it wants to with your money. If the bank gets into difficulty, you have to line up behind the secured creditors, which, surprise, surprise, are mostly in the form of other banks, and you will be lucky to see your money ever again. Now, the banks can actually decide how much money gets injected into the economy, and that's where the problem comes, because money becomes scarce. And because money is scarce, there are people who don't have money, and there are people who have a lot of money. So we now have what we call property orphans coming into the market. They are children, young people who will never be able to afford to buy a house.
Where does the word mortgage come from? And I say mort means death, gage means grip, okay?
We set up Positive Money New Zealand, which is based on Positive Money UK, and we say the government needs to issue our money supply free of debt. Now, that doesn't mean to say there won't be a place for banks. Banks will be there, but their job is to act as an intermediary between people with money to invest and people who want to borrow loans. They will no longer be able to create money out of thin air and lend it to us at compounding interest. Currently, the amount of money that's in circulation is toxic. It has this debt burden to it. The way that the current system is set up is there has to be growth in the economy simply to create the money to pay for the interest on the already existing debt. Surprising thing is that when you pay back your mortgage to the bank, that money disappears. Because the money was created from nothing, it returns to nothing. It has impacts on the environment. We're looking at deep sea oil drilling, we're looking at mining in our national park, fracking, and it's ridiculous. We do not need to do any of that. There is more than enough money to go around. So when you look at money creation, not only does it have benefits for the economy, but it also has benefits for the planet as well. We would no longer be hell-bent on trying to get more money out of a finite world or more resources out of a finite world to pay for the interest on money the banks never had in the first place. And the national government has refused to speak to us. So Bill English has said, I'm not going to speak to you. We are following world's best practice.
Global corporatists are determined to subjugate each country through their economy. So, funnily enough, the only countries that are right now outside of this central banking control are Cuba, North Korea, Syria, Iran, and Russia and China.
How about Malaysia?
Well, Malaysia is certainly resisting. I mean, just like I said, New Zealand was resisting, and then an event was created to ensure that New Zealand was pushed into debt slavery.
The current system we have is the loony system. Now, we're going down the same way that Portugal, Greece, Ireland and Spain went. And you know what happened then? The housing market collapsed. So we can do nothing and wait for that to happen, and the results will be horrendous. The World Bank will come in and flog off the remaining state assets we have, and we'll be worse off than we are today. The government of Iceland refused to pay back or honour the debts of the banks. The banks got themselves into the problem. The government of Iceland said, you get yourself out of it. This is not the people's responsibility. Now that's a very good place to start. In Ireland, they did the exact opposite. The banks got the state of Ireland into all sorts of trouble, and then the Irish government bailed out the banks, so the Irish economy is in tatters. The banks should fall over if they make financial mistakes. Everyone else does. With our current system, the Reserve Bank is meant to be the watchdog that looks after our economy, but it's doing an awful job. It's one of those watchdogs that watched the burglars come in, take all the money, and then the burglar pats the dog on the head as it walks off and says, "Good dog." The Australian banks are actually dictating to the Reserve Bank how much money gets introduced into the system. There is little or no constraint on our Australian banks, and they have more control over our money supply than our elected government.
The outrageous situation, for example, in Australia, where Australia should be the wealthiest nation on the planet because of its phenomenal natural resources, yet the Australian people have the highest level of personal debt on the planet.
I think the monetary system's privatised, and it's all held by Australian banks that are in part owned by American banks and British banks. So our banking system already is effectively what the TPPA require it to be, owned by large corporate interests who tell the government what to do.
So take it from a Canadian to tell you about free trade. A guy whose country now has foreign ownership up to almost 80%. A guy whose country and his countrymen, 36% of them believe, will become a part of the United States within 25 years. The Trans-Pacific Partnership is an arrangement that will take from you your sovereignty in a very powerful and personal way.
They compressed all the financial data of the world into the supercomputer, and they were trying to find out who controls all the money, what controls everything. There's 176 corporations that control about 60% of the world's economy. That means these 176 corporations control the world economy. And the shareholders in this are something like 7 families. So 7 families control 70% of the world's, 60% of the world's wealth, give or take.
I think it was one of the Rockefellers once was asked, when have you got enough? And he stopped and said, and thought about it, and then he said, just a little more.
A lot of these people, they're creating segregation through us, through creating systems created by the Crown. And the Crown is a system that controls our nation. The Crown is our government. The Crown is disconnection. The more we contract with the Crown, the more disconnected from that earth and from each other we become. Unfortunately, it's become about corporations. Such things as the TPPA reinforce corporate greed over people, where whole corporations from other countries can come to New Zealand and sue us for future profit, loss of future profit, if we do things that are against their philosophy, their corporate ego and their corporate identities.
As I visit all the people I interview and hear their stories, I'm all the more surprised why my interviewees often get branded conspiracy theorists by those who just want to stay asleep. If all this makes so much sense, then why do so many people not care?
Why do you think it is that people find it so hard to read
Because it's
stuff?
true.
And people don't want truth?
No.
People are very receptive to honesty. However, at the same time, they reject it and they don't value it.
We are suffering, we are burdened, we are heavy. We've been enduring many years of evolution. And we have a lot of history under the bridge and under our belts and on our backs that we carry around with us. Memories, whether that's DNA memory, whether that's unconscious memory, whether it's the memory in the waters, we are storing our history. And that's a lot of weight to carry around.
My own belief is that we're in a boot camp.
Planet Earth's a boot camp.
That planet Earth is a boot camp.
We're designed to come from a place of unconsciousness and become conscious. We're designed to learn like a child.
We're actually cosmic beings. I'm interested as a physicist in plasma physics. I believe that, 99%, the physicists know, 99% of the universe is plasma, which is very low density matter. It's non-atomic matter. It's electrically charged particles. And these particles are blown off by stars into space. And the space plasma is electrically active, and life is based on electrical activity. So this plasma is much better for life than atomic matter. So I believe there's a strong possibility that space is full of these plasmic beings that are ancient, and that they've actually, they're coming into these atomic bodies, that they've actually created these atomic bodies. They're using water, which is very like plasma. It's got electrical activity, and they're, if you like, in the evolutionary process, but I believe it's directed by intelligence and held by fields, and these fields are electromagnetic fields, which are based on plasma. You've got a little tiny drop of water suspended in a jelly, suspended as a jelly in protein, which is the cell, and you get the electrical activity in that cell, which in our case, these cells are suspended on sticks of stone, which we call bone. So I think that these, and this is what the Cathars taught, is that these angelic beings have actually evolved us and brought us into being. So we are those beings. You see, what I believe is that we're plasmic beings. If you take plasma, plasma is low-density matter, it's invisible and it fills space. And that's the definition for spirit. As plasmic beings, I think we've actually created atomic matter. I believe the same fields, the morphogenetic fields, the life fields behind life forms, which scientists like Harold Saxton Burr, Rupert Sheldrake talk about, these fields also hold the atom. I don't think the atom's that random. They're very precise quantum states.
If these bodies were designed for us to experience life on Earth, then why did we design such a limited version?
I've spent my life working on this vortex physics, and one of the conclusions I come to is that the vortex, which is the electron, every electron is a whirlpool of light, a whirlpool of energy, but there's no end to it. It stretches into infinity. So these electrically charged particles that make up plasma are infinite in extension, which means that when you move one, the movement is affected to the end of the universe. So all knowledge is known everywhere in plasma. You can't hold secrets. It's unlimited knowledge. Everything's connected by the infinite extension of the electron. And this is one of the things Einstein proved, is the, the non-locality of electrons. So the thing is that we've created this limited state so that we can be in amnesia, so that we can be in a situation of not knowing, so that we can be limited. Because there are certain lessons that we need to learn as divine beings, as God-made man. The word human, the word hu is Egyptian, it's a human, the God-man being.
If there was only love and light and that was it, and that's all we knew and that's all we were, there would be no humanity, there would be no journey, there would be no point to all of this.
When a person incarnates, they may decide to put themselves on pause, meaning they don't become aware of who they are really and what they're here to do. They might put themselves on pause in a sense because they need to become part of Wall Street banking or whatever it is, and they're not meant to become aware of what's going on really until they get into becoming the bank manager. And 2012 arrives, they're in a nice position, they're on the inside. So how many hundreds of thousands of people in those positions all over the planet have just awoken and are about to wake up?
You get your epiphany, and that's coming fast and thick for a lot of people these days. For a lot of people, the gateway was 9/11. A lot of people woke up to 9/11. Not completely, but they woke up to the fact that their government was lying to them yet again, my God, and immediately closed down. Because to go down that path meant to continue to open doors to the real deal.
Live in this current society where people get ostracized, rejected, and called conspiracy theorists for talking about things that are outside of the norm, where people have this tall poppy syndrome and that prevents them from even having the motivation to express, let alone fulfill the promise of original ideas. Can you blame them for not thinking originally? Can you blame them for being ignorant? No, because you don't get rewarded for being intelligent. You get rewarded for exploitation.
Oh, so you've got your ecology and your economics under siege at the same time, and it's no coincidence because both of them are completely out of balance with, you know, the creative solutions that the cosmos developed to allow humanity to live as it does.
If you go up to a giant pyramid and you think, ooh, that's a huge stone, bro. How am I gonna lift that? Do you try to lift it yourself? No, because it's too big. You don't bother. So, that's where humanity's at. They think the problem's so big that they can't do it.
It's like we talk about addiction, and it's easy to say we're addicted to alcohol, or we're addicted to drugs, or our medication, but there's an addiction to struggle. There's an addiction to being stuck. And in a way, it feels comfortable because it's what we know. We get trapped in what we know. And so it's easy to come home at the end of a hard day of work and slump in front of the TV after a couple of glasses of wine and to just blob out. And for life to just keep happening, on and on it goes, and we don't really take responsibility for getting out of that rut, doing something different that brings us back into our more natural state.
I've got this basket as an example. The way this basket was made is that the weaver soaked these fibres in water before weaving them. And then once the basket pattern had been woven, then it sets solid and keeps its shape. Now this is what happens in the brain. In a young brain, it's almost like the pliable cane that's been soaked. You can manipulate the dendrites, you can manipulate the pattern in the brain. And then what happens is as the brain sets, as it grows older, you get a template where you get a set pattern that's very difficult, it's very rigid, you can't change it. So if you can get hold of a child and teach them, program them, whilst the brain is pliable, then a pattern sets for the rest of their lives. This is why the Jesuits say, give me a child from 0 to 7 and you can keep him for the rest of his life.
As we get into be adults and we have all these problems that we've got to face and deal with, all the bills we've got to pay and all the difficulties we have with coping with work and extra time for this and running children here and there, we're just stuck. And it's a treadmill we can't get off.
We've got a whole system which is basically sets people up in terms of their socialisation to be compliant.
The problem we have today is that people are burdened down by debt. They're in survival mode and they just want to get through to the next day.
Human beings aren't evil, you know.
That's
we
right.
want to be in harmony. You know?
That's right.
The way our body looks for harmony, our mind wants to do the same. It's constantly thinking of systems of how can I bring it back.
Are you willing to take responsibility for your own thoughts totally? Regardless of who is running the show, for you not to take responsibility for your own thoughts is automatically giving them power over you. The fact is that when you start to wake up and you want desperately to go back to sleep, you can if you want to, but it ain't gonna do you no good. Once you start, having a look at, it's like a hologram. You take one little piece, blow it up, and it's the whole fucking picture.
Humanity has been taught that the mind is the dominant aspect because we see that that's what it's creating our outside world, okay? Well, the mind is a very powerful aspect and it does create the outside world, but one of the biggest problems with that is we've come to a stage now where we've created so much in the outside world, it's time to revert back to the inside world. And
bring the attention that goes out there, bring it back here, and appreciate what's been given to you.
Well, the mind's overloading with thought.
Right.
Okay, so the mind thinks so much. I mean, it's like, for example, still the mind. That statement is delusional, okay? That's an impossibility in science for the mind to become still. Focus the mind, send it on a journey, put it in a tree, create a mantra, okay, there.
My mind thinks it knows what life is all about, what it is to be a human being, what it is to love another person. But actually, really that gets me in a mess. That creates a lot of problems. The other side is to know what love is, to know what life is, to know what's the truth, to know reality, because I can feel it, because it exists, because I have something else which actually has the capacity to know, rather than to think that I know.
One of the things about the human mind is, unless you instruct it to do something, it does whatever it wants, okay? So if I'm moving along with my mind, thinking a lot, repeating my thought here and there, then I go, hang on, I want to stop that, okay? So I go and do something to stop that. Unless I repeat that stopping principle point, the mind will just go back onto its same journey of externalizing everything around it. So if you're using your mind only to create your external reality, in most cases your expectation, you'll have disappointment and things like that, and a lot of this stuff will arise in your life. But if you're using your entire being to create and using your mind as the channeled point of that creation, then you will be a lot more powerful. An exercise I get, particularly with our 21st Century Youth Program, what I get the youth to do is go in the mirror every morning, and the first exercise they do it for 7 times. So they go, I love myself, okay?
I love you, me. I love you, me. Me. To bring awareness to the self, to the all that is right here, expressed in this body, is something so unique, so precious, so magnificent. It's worth humbling to, it's worth coming home to, it's worth recognizing and spending some time with.
Well, we're brainwashed, okay? The system is a brainwashing system. It consistently brainwashes us all the time. The biggest aspect of brainwashing is fear, of course, okay? But fear is a human element as well. So fear can never be removed, but it can be faced.
The searching of the mind for knowledge, the searching of the mind for something that is real, for something that is true, for something that means something. And that can lead us into very dark, empty, lonely, greedy thoughts.
Where does that thought come from? Am I creating it? If I'm creating that particular thought or downloading it, where am I downloading it from? And is that thought efficacious or evidential? Does it have meaning? You know?
So our free will is making us choose this in a way, maybe not fully consciously, and so is our journey maybe to wake up from that, so that we can say, hey, no more.
Yes, hey,
so
no more.
So it's a beautiful divine plan in a way.
That's right, yes.
So another good exercise to do is, if you have a major problem, or you see a major problem within yourself, if you look for the other side of that problem. If I have a problem with you, for example, okay, so I have a problem with you. Now I can break that problem right down to, I have a problem with the way you talk. The other side of the problem is coming from me, because I have that problem, you see? So as soon as I identify the part of the problem that's within me, I'll release my problem that I have with you externally.
The paradigm of trying to understand life, the universe, everything with our minds, and understand all of creation with our minds, and understand the purpose of that and who we are, with something very limited, to shift out of that and move into a place of knowing, of being, of isness, of expanse, of feeling, of reality in our hearts. And let our minds catch up with that eventually and try and figure that one out. But let it not be the master, let it not be leading us down dark alleyways, as it has done.
Empirical neurologists are starting to question orthodoxy in terms of the brain function. You know, the brain is considered as one organ. It's not. It's 2 completely separate organs divided by the corpus callosum. And the left brain is acknowledged to be that part of the human physical vehicle which provides us with the, if you like, the antenna to interpret through the 5 senses. It's the physical, empirical, material transmitter-receiver. The right brain is a completely different kettle of fish. And I mean, one hypothesis that's been put forward is that actually we don't retain any intelligence at all within the physical vehicle.
I completely resonate with that. We're just receivers.
We're tapping into the mainframe, as it were.
And emotions do get stored, I feel, in the body, in the cells.
But there's no question about that, because the empirical evidence is there with transplants. You know, and where people who receive organs from donors actually inherit some of the unique capabilities, capacities, belief systems of the donor. I mean, one of the classic examples.
I want to eat chips, and I've only never liked chips.
Exactly. Well, I'd say one of the classics is a lady from Canada who actually got the heart of an 18-year-old male. And because of her lifestyle, she was very ill, and she'd obviously been very careful about her diet. And when she actually came out of the anaesthetic from having the heart transplant, in fact, she had a heart and lung transplant, and the first thing she said was, I could murder a beer and a Kentucky Fried Chicken. I actually spent some time talking with a retired orthopedic surgeon, and he said, Ian, he said, anyone who works in surgery knows that when you are giving people massive blood transfusion, it's absolutely essential that you keep them sedated, because they go through a massive emotional turmoil as the foreign blood sort of rushes through their system. So the point of making this observation is that we need to unleash ourselves, untie ourselves from the bounds of orthodoxy, and be prepared to consider something that orthodoxy considers to be completely crazy, because they don't really know.
So we know about the heart a lot more now, and it's not just for pumping blood, it's a whole issue that relates to things like compassion and consciousness and empathy. The cosmos is clever, the body is clever, and the more you learn, the more you realise just how clever the whole system is.
As I'm treating with ozone, there's a very high probability that we're going to overcome the physical illness. So what I say to the person is, as you recover from this, you might want to start developing a new mindset now, because I can tell you your physical problems are going to ease. So that's not going to be in your life anymore. But if you've got the old mindset, well, what's going to stop it just coming back? So start now thinking about how you want to think about yourself, how you want to approach the world, and what your philosophy of life is going to be. Grow into your higher self. Become that for which you pray.
People come, they expect a practitioner to cure them. The way I see it is that the body has an innate ability to heal itself given the right conditions. A lot of people are they're degenerating because of the system that we're in. And what I think that you're asking, and what we're inquiring about, is how do we pick ourselves up and step out of that? And the first place to go is nutrition. Grow your own food, drink pure water, surround yourself with uplifting ideas and people, and get the issues and the tissues out. Our bodies are lodging all our history or her story in the very tissues of our body. And talking about them doesn't do it. You need to move that story, that energy in by deep breath work, by going out in nature and connecting.
Localizing food is bringing our food systems, our food sovereignty, our food independence back home. And home isn't just me with my little garden and my household. Home is my neighborhood. Home is my community. Home is my bioregion. So it's actually being interdependent with our food, from trading to growing to seed banks and seed exchanges, to value-added products that add this other potential for another income stream, to kids' gardens and schools and learning through that. It goes on and on. Community gardens, open orchards. There's a whole plethora of examples that both in this country and around the world say this momentum is strong. That's also a counterforce to ownership, power, control, chemical companies buying up small family seed companies, terminator genes, GE crops, taking the food commodity further and further away from people's reach and controlling that to control the people. So people in the city It's not just, again, my little apartment or my suburban house or my rental property, it's our neighbourhood. What spare land is in our neighbourhood? What tiny little area have you got? Let's take down the fence. Let's make a gate in the fence. Where's the wild harvest areas? How can we go and glean together on the outskirts of the city and make a picnic of it with our families so that we bring back the surplus fruit so we can add our labour to the farmers? It's a much bigger vision. Start with sprouts on your kitchen bench. Something living, a living food, you know, sprouts in jars. That's the very first living. And a worm farm, so that your kids can see, so that you're feeding the scraps into your worm farm, and a tiny little area that is a container garden. That's what I start with city people, rental people, container gardens. Gardens in buckets, gardens in baskets, gardens in boxes, and you can move them around. Even much more advantage than having a garden in one place. You can have them greet the sun, and as the sun moves, you can move them. That's one thing, and the other thing is join a community garden.
It's so nice to see how your face lights up when you speak about this. What is this? What does this mean for you?
Not only my face lights up, my heart is just like almost exploding with joy and delight. What it is, it's a gift. It's a gift from nature. It's a gift from the ocean, and it's not predictable. You can't say, oh, I'm going to go to that forest this day and I'm going to harvest. Wild nature, wild harvest is never predictable. So it's sort of like, it's a surprise.
This kind of activity, you have to surrender because you cannot manipulate it. I can't think, oh, I want a burger now, walk to a snack bar and get a burger right there and then. Whereas this, you have to just see what nature gives you in that moment. So it requires an amount of surrendering.
I kind of really tuned into the seasons and what is the surplus or what's the shedding off of nature from that season and what can be used as a resource with respect of not taking too much leaving for others and leaving back for the earth and for the ocean. Everything you handle and everything you use in your life, look at where does it come from? What's its cradle to grave, you know, analysis? Where's it made? What about the people who've made it? Are they slave labor somewhere in China or whatever? And how can you actually create that thing differently? You know, have you got a local person who can make it? Welcome to Stream Song, name of my home. I first of all wanted to make sure that I used as much local materials as possible and natural materials, starting from this particular site, then this land, then Golden Bay, and I've achieved that. All of the clay in this home is excavated from these banks. All of the stones are from Golden Bay rivers and quarry. And all of the timber, which is structural timber, is from other farms, other forests in Golden Bay milled locally. Small, buildings small. So this is really like a sleep out in a way, but it's got an outdoor kitchen, and so it's fully in an outdoor shower, indoor-outdoor, sort of fully self-contained, really.
I don't see how you'd need more.
That's right.
Visiting Robina has opened up a whole world for me. To be shown how easy it is for people to make small steps towards a life more in harmony with the natural ways, I decided to film some more people who can give me insight into more sustainable living solutions.
We've been off the grid entirely the whole time we've been here for 24 years. And that's a journey. We started with solar when it was really expensive. And now look at it, you know, anyone can do it. Well, all the rural people in this district take their water from either tanks or rivers. Yeah, we get it from a river. We planted too many fruit trees. We've got food forests here and we're oppressed by fruit. You know, there's so much fruit, but we give it to the birds in a way, but we also give it to our neighbours and we ask them to come up. And that is our solar water heater. And that is, well, Yvonne says that's the best purchase we ever made in our life because it was $2,000, I think, at the time, quite expensive, but Oh, it's just been so good. It's a family size. We had solar for many years, and now for the last 6 or 8 years, this is a micro hydro. You can see the water coming out there. I built a nice housing for it. Creates electricity 24/7, all night long. It's absolutely revolutionised our lives, and I really recommend them. The water's then going into a purpose-built wetland, and you've got an ecology happening there. I can show you the piece here. This is the Rolls Royce. This is a really good model with really good bearings. Saying when I came here 24 years ago as a city boy, and I'd swapped my house that I bought when I was 19 in Hamilton, and then the land disparity values meant that I had this 400 acres, I had this river, I was here by myself, I didn't have a partner then, I was like, but I was ecstatic. I remember being on the stretch of river and just whooping for joy that I was in nature and I could have this place, not personally, but be a part of it. Life on the rock shows us how healthy our ecosystem is. It's a very good test. When you're near a river, pick up some rocks and look underneath them. These are the buckets that are part of our toilet system.
What you've got there is shit.
Yeah, this is what it becomes. With the sawdust organic matter, this is already nearly done, isn't it?
It looks like proper soil.
Yeah.
And there's no smell.
All the paper's gone, there's no smell. I mean, if you want, I'll hold it with my hand, you know, it's just like full of worms.
I also decided to visit a lady called Daring Donna, who has introduced a very interesting gift economy initiative.
We have created this amazing project called the Earth House, which we have been running now for a year. It's self-funding and self-resourced by a part of this amazing community in the faraway north called Peria. And there's a group of us that have got together and said, okay, how can we work together and create something that is organic, zero waste, alternative energy, based on gift, coming from the heart, love and action. And this is it, the Earth House.
Yeah, to me the Earth House is, I mean, there's so many different aspects to it. We want to create something positive in the world. There's no sort of dwelling on all the crap that's going on out there and this and the other thing. We're sort of focusing on what we're doing.
It's very much a community-centred and based initiative. You know, a lot of the food is coming from our gardens, we're going for organics. We've got this wonderful cycle which goes, you know, all the waste from the kitchen goes into the compost goes onto the garden, and then the produce from the garden goes back into the kitchen.
Rather than having a menu, we look at our gardens to see what's in there. So for instance, fresh feta, goat's feta, Janika makes that from the goats down the valley, carrots and beetroot all from the valley, carrot dip all from the valley, greenery from the people just out that's sitting out at the table, they grow all the greenery for us, corn brought in. Yeah, so the whole philosophy was let food be your medicine, because I just saw it there.
I've lived in the area for 26 years in a community, an isolated community, so I've had to be very resourceful with cooking and growing and whatever in my garden. So I've got a few ideas for some strange vegetables that we can use and things that are easy to grow, basically.
We are based in gift economy, which is you give with great love from your heart, whatever you feel to give.
They pay what they want to pay. Not only that, but everyone receives what they need.
There's no tables or individually for people to sit and eat on. There's community, so people sit around and talk together. There's no sort of separation.
We're not actually focusing on the commerce of the enterprise. We're just focusing on the energy of it, how everyone's feeling, how we're looking after each other, how we're heading into the future.
I thought it was amazing to see all these projects, you know, to visit this small community here in Northland, New Zealand. I realized that it takes all sorts of people, basically. You know, some people are really drawn to being in the middle of nowhere, like up here. But other people might be more inclined to be with large groups of people in a creative hub, more sort of the city kind of constellations. And it would be great in a new paradigm if there was a solution for everyone, you know? We can't just have one mold for everyone. We have to make space for the authenticity of each individual. And one of the projects that I'm really into is the Venus Project.
How long will it take to build these cities?
I would say it would take about approximately 10 years to change the surface of the Earth
with multiple jigs and giant machines, not bricklayers, plasterers, high-tech systems about 10 years. Big garden cities all over the world. But we'd have to level most of the old cities and mine them for steel, glass, whatever we can get from them. After we level the cities, we might keep a few cities as museum cities to show people what people used to live in, to show kids of the future what the world used to be, just as the pyramids would be preserved. This is inside the new city. You see it around? This is just where people live. Flowers, gardens, no slums, no street people, no hungry people.
Hi, my name's Andrew Buxton. I'm the co-founder of the Venus Project Design with my partner Yulito Vielgat. We started working for the Venus Project 2 years ago to help them develop the physical models that Jacques has done throughout his life with Roxanne into 3D CGI for use in future films and media. We're also building up a global database of scientists and technicians, engineers, architects, etc., which we intend to use at a later date if any countries or if there's a global move towards a resource-based economy, that we'd be in a position to be able to help build teams globally to begin the design of the first cities.
Based on sacred geometry or template reality, when nature's doing its thing, then the best or most economic way that nature combines units together is with 12 around the centre one. So this is some of these shapes based on the golden ratio, and which is the source of template reality. And what we're looking at or talking about before about the social structure in the 12 around 1. So we could grab one of these here, and we've got 12, I'm calling them 12 departments or 12 aspects of a community, and they just perfectly pack around a central hub like that. The Thrive group and a number of other groups are beginning to realise that a social structure needs to be, for optimum success, needs to be following patterns of nature, and this is the prime pattern of nature. Basically, you've got what you would call the farming, which would be like the permaculture. That would be one whole unit, which would be how to deal with animals and plants and growing and composting and everything that's involved in that. Then you've got another one which would be like urban and infrastructure, which is like the Venus Project, where you've got how best to provide all the structural elements to large numbers of people. You've got the healing aspect, all the hospitals and everything involved in birthing and dying. What can happen is that there can fit in just snugly inside this shape here, which is the same shape but at a bigger size. And then same thing again, you could, this white one here is part of the hub, not the whole thing, but part of the hub, and then that one packs in there, and once again you can have 12 around there. So that's here's Golden Bay, here's Nelson, here's Christchurch, here, you know, whatever. So you get another bigger version. There's 144 in this one, and it will materialise all the things that's in the Venus Project, except in a much more economical way.
If we are so busy trying to keep our heads above water financially, then how can we start this change?
We need to reconnect with each other, reconnect with the earth to bring about sacred reciprocity with each other and the earth so that we can survive into the future, to create a life of fulfillment and prosperity for everyone. Universal basic income is a living allowance of a yearly figure that is paid to every single individual on this planet. and every single one of those people gets enough money to provide the basic needs of society, because we've evolved into a form of society where people are completely reliant upon each other and upon a system for survival. So to access that system, they need money. People can't live as tribal people anymore because there's no access to land through segregation of lands, through legislative process and ownership. Provision of $12, $15, $20,000 a year per person, whatever it takes, is what it takes to give people access to that which they need. They get creative, they start growing their own food, set up community-supported agriculture models. So people work within systems that they choose to work in out of choice of what gives them prosperity and what gives them success, a sense of passion. Basic income is financed, from my perspective, through transaction tax. So every day there's multiple transactions on this planet. Billions upon billions upon billions of dollars are transacted every day. So if you take a percentage cut of those transactions, it will redistribute all wealth, creating no longer people reliant on benefit systems, no more sickness benefit, no more unemployment benefit. If you bring social systems in where people are treated fairly and equally, they will then care for their environment more, and then the economy will boom.
I believe you're working hard for what you earn. If you work hard, then you get more, but everyone should have a baseline.
I think it'll be a good idea.
Totally a scarce resource because it comes off a printing press. Make as much as you want and give it away.
They need to, because otherwise we're going to have all the problems that we have now, aren't we?
I would support that.
No, wouldn't like that.
I think that could be something that we should think about more.
It needs a lot of thought how this can be implemented, but I think it's worth to think about it.
In the last 10, 20 years, so many really switched on young people have decided to incarnate, so that's a great sign.
Whatever they're doing, you can teach what they need to learn through that medium. If they're building a hut, you can teach them maths, you can teach them about cultures, you can teach them English, you can teach them planning, resourcefulness.
Yesterday, a few volunteers, pupils, were working on emptying old cardboard from a closet to the waste deposit downstairs. I asked the pupil, why is it in a separate container? And he didn't know. I said, try to figure out why that would be, because that is plastic and this is carton. Why is that separate? Yeah, recycling maybe. And then I said, okay, can you make a presentation? And he said, I have an iPad. So he started working on a Prezi, and there was some spelling mistakes in it. So he sat and I admired the Prezi and corrected the spelling mistakes. And I said, but you copy-pasted some information from Wikipedia apparently about how many, what is paper and what is carton, and it had to do with the weight of the paper. It was expressed in grams per square meter. I said, what is a square meter? And we tried to find tape so we could put a square meter. I said, what you have to do within your Prezi, make some calculation exercises for all the children. The pupil is teaching the younger ones, because he's quite old, he's 11, teaching the younger ones to in the whole arithmetic scene.
If they're learning about those things in that way, then those things are meaningful. Whereas if they're sitting in the classroom and they're going 1 + 1 is 2, da 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 da.
Look how parents teach their children, or teach their children, help their children master the world and imitate and copy that behavior. Much more than, okay, we don't wear shoes in here, so they slide through these nice long corridors. I say, first, I say to them, maybe that's nice to show on the game day, because apparently you're good at breakdancing, so start working on it. B, if somebody comes out, how would you react if you would collide? But if a child is running to his classroom, I'm glad.
And it would be great if, as part of the new paradigm education for children, that in maths lessons, or physics lessons, they are starting to play with these kind of things, really.
This is my own personal goal, is to that's why I'm building these, is to get them into the local school system somehow.
I'm going to say something very, very radical here. And I'm going to speak it out, how it is true for me. One of my things I do is I get seed banks into schools. I have children become kaitiaki or caretakers of the seeds for their future generations, and there's a reason for that. Because as in many countries, sharing seeds has become illegal. Perhaps sharing and selling open pollinated seeds is illegal. If that happens in our country, are you going to break into a school and arrest kids for having a seed bank? And their sense of their guardianship of those seeds has come through them growing them, harvesting them, drawing beautiful pictures on them, naming them, putting them. They are totally like, we are caretaking for these seeds for not just us but for our community, and adults have to come and ask them for seeds.
Children are way more clever than adults give them credit for. Children can learn really, really quickly, and they model, they copy. So schools often, a lot of the brightest people are held back by schools. Steve Jobs is a good example, dropped out. Albert Einstein's a good example. Albert Einstein was considered by his professor to be a dull student and nothing much would come of him, and he couldn't even get a job as a school teacher the year he wrote the theory of relativity. So it's an example, and the same with Steve Jobs. He could never have done what he did with the beautiful integrated operating system behind Apple if he'd stayed inside the university, because he would have lost a lot of the creativity and a lot of the drive, because he would have been required to conform.
A bunch of templates, a bunch of blueprints, and everything else, including all the dimensions, all the consciousness, all the emotional realms, all the mental realms, everything is all constructed on these templates. So the universe is really a thought.
Who did that?
Well, that's the big question, where you put the question mark. You have collectors of consciousness, so humanity is a collective of consciousness. Eventually, humanity becomes what ends up being humanity, becomes a unified humanity. And that unified humanity joins together with other unified collectives. I'll use a famous term by the Ra channeling source, law of Run. A soul memory complex is the way they term a whole society that's unified. So then you join with another whole society which is unified from somewhere else, and then you join together as collectives of them. And the creative potential of those is beyond any person's imagination, but eventually you create larger and larger, longer lasting scenarios.
We're divine beings in physical manifestation. I believe this being Satan I've mentioned. Where does that word come from? Satan is an anagram of Sanat. Sanat Kumara. He's the oldest firstborn son of Brahma. This comes from the ancient Vedic knowledge. And Sananda Kumara is the secondborn. And if you fit that with the Judaic idea, Lucifer is the firstborn, Michael is the secondborn. It's the same story of the two brothers, the elder brother and the younger brother. So I believe that they create the spectrum of duality in which we grow and learn. We're tempted to be good by Michael, by Jesus. We're tempted to be bad by Lucifer, by Jehovah. And you know, neither one nor is good nor bad. It's like in Bali, they have the checkered white and black flag. Good and evil are a duality for learning, for progress.
In the perverse occult belief system of those who think they're the rightful rulers of the planet, they do actually have to tell us what they're going to do. It doesn't mean to say they put it on the front page of the most sort of popular red top paper, but it means that somewhere out there, the script has to be available. And then it's up to the individuals whether or not they go seek it out.
Wow, so it's to do almost with this free will thing.
Yes. And that's what a gift.
I love that. Oh, wow.
Both shoulders.
Wow. Part of the game here on planet Earth is free will, free choice.
Yes.
So they cannot push it upon us. We have to have known it before they do it, and then have consented by not stopping it.
So the three most powerful tools that these entities have are all in our control. That is our apathy, our abdication, and our willful ignorance, cognitive dissonance. And in their belief system, the most powerful tool there is abdication, because abdication means that we've got a pretty good idea what it is they're going to do, and we choose, even though we know, to ignore it.
Humanity is the hare sleeping under the tree, and the New World Order, or the conspiracy, if you want to call it, and the psychopath, the scumbags, are the tortoise, and they're nearly at the finish line. They've almost got everything that they need in order to dominate humanity forever in an irresistible global dictatorship. We've got all the mass surveillance, we've got all of that.
I think it's wrong of any politician to take away the public's seat at the table of government and say, you'll simply have to trust us. And you know what? It's not in the public interest to know about these programs.
Humanity's only just waking up under the tree and thinking, oh my God, I've better get a run on because that tortoise is going to reach the finish line. That's where we're at right now. We're really, really far behind, but we're moving really, really quickly. The New World Order is really far ahead, but their progress is slow, and their progress is getting slower and slower.
They're having a tough time right now, the people who want to dumb us down and control and kill us. It's not going according to plan.
You either have constructive wave interference or destructive wave interference. So destructive wave interference cancels itself out. Scenario, 4 bank robbers combine their forces to go in and rob the bank, and they achieve their what they want to do by combining their forces to do that. They get out of the bank, each has got an own agenda to shoot the other and take all the money. It's just how they work and how they think. So that's destructive interference. It cancels itself out. There's no need to even pay attention to it. It's going to cancel itself out.
We have the Julian Assanges and Edward Snowdens of this world coming out and revealing government documents, and people really like that kind of thing because it has tangibility. There's an actual document. This actually happened. It's not somebody's theory, this is real. And they have admitted absolutely everything that they're doing in this document. So therefore, it's really going on, and only somebody who refuses to believe it will be able to deny it. And it's that simple refusal to believe something that is really challenging to your current worldview and perception, that's called cognitive dissonance.
I view my job as a journalist to hold accountable and to provide a check on those who wield the greatest power. And the way that that is done, in my view, most properly is by scrutinizing and investigating the claims that government officials make rather than just mindlessly and uncritically repeating them. If you want to mindlessly and uncritically repeat government claims, you should go work for the government as a government spokesperson.
Those who think they're the rightful rulers know that humanity is actually evolving this capability and this capacity to extend their thought process beyond the matrix.
So it's gone out of hand. The experiment
Yes.
that started grew and grew and grew. We've multiplied richly, and now we're evolving to a point that we're starting to remember who we actually are. So then the next step is those that think they're the rightful rulers are doing something to stop this.
Well, they've been doing it for quite some time, but they've certainly accelerated the agenda greatly in the last 100+ years.
People are waking up. The power of consciousness is huge. As soon as people realize that they have the power, then the rollback begins, and it has already begun. There's a huge pushback going all over the place in every possible dimension, and this is really exciting stuff.
This is exciting.
Yeah, I know.
The unfolding universe is a real-time, self-consciously developing something or other, and so it wants to further that progress, so it creates fractal versions of itself, smaller ones, realizing that those versions of itself eventually form together in groups, and the potential that those groups can then put into practice is as yet unknown, and that creates more beauty, and so it goes on. So at some point in the past on these different planets and these different solar systems, there came a moment when there was an era which was like the era of decision making, and X number of people from each of those places decided to go towards a more positive evolution. Others decided to take a more negative tangent, and then a whole heap of them from each of these places didn't decide either positive or negative. So when they died, they had to or they were attracted to come to another place or another scenario which was just sort of setting up itself so they could re-experience that same sort of era or that same sort of pattern over so many thousands of years, and so they were attracted to come here and experience once again the opportunity to get to a point like 2012 where they could then once again make a decision whether they were going to choose negative future or positive future or not choose at all. And then if they die, then they go elsewhere and do the same thing again.
This ball of clay, which is like, looks a little bit dry, but just look beyond it, represents the all that ever was, all that is, and all that ever will be. It's source. It's from which everything is created and derived. Everything is already in this ball of clay. Everything that is this ball of clay. And so, because it wants to be creative, it separates itself and does little experiments. So it says, for instance, all right, I'm going to play God, so I'm going to separate myself from this ball of clay. I'm going to make myself into a god, all right? And, all right, that's cool. I'm going to separate myself from this source energy, and I'm going to be playing human with a bunch of others, okay? And so the role play we're going to do is worship. We've got God here. Doesn't he look awesome? And here we've got a human, all right? And we need a setting to play this on. So we're gonna like create a little ball and we're gonna call it Planet Earth, yeah? So the game is that you're gonna live on this earth and you're gonna worship me, yeah? Okay, cool, let's do that. And the other thing that we'll do is we will make sure that we want to remember. And the fun part of it is that not only do we experience this whole experience, but we have to go back to remembering slowly. That's what we're going to be doing. Okay, cool. So these humans, there's heaps of them, go to planet Earth and they start experimenting with the feeling of worshipping, okay? And this God says, okay, I'm going to start feeling what it's like to be worshipped. And let's see what I can do with all the powers that I have. And so this goes on for quite a few thousands of years, and quite a lot of these humans remember. Quite a lot of them, it's been way too long to remember. They don't remember, they don't know anything anymore. They just walk through the planet and do their thing. Anyway, there comes a point where those that have remembered will go home, they go back to the ball of clay, and those that haven't remembered might one day remember and go back to the ball of clay. Anyway, there's an end to everything, right? Nothing lasts forever. So, God goes home, and little human goes home. And so they all merge again with the ball of clay. There comes a point where a new experiment is going to be done. I mean, there's always thousands and millions of experiments being done from the one source, where this little piece says, now I am going to play God. Now I want to know what it's like to play God. And another piece comes out and says, now I'm going to know this, all of us, we're going to be humans now. Now, what's so interesting is that the one that was playing God before, its essence is also in this new experiment. So this is the new human. Beautiful, like. And the new human has a lot of its essence from what was God before, because they come from the same pool of creation. And the one that's playing God now is actually has the essence of a lot of the humans that had gone back to the ball of clay. So at the end of the day, we are all from the same source. That means that God is God, but it means you are God too. That means planet Earth is God. It means you are God. It means I am God. It means the grass is God. The tree is. Everything that you can see around you. And so I'm making this film, right? And the reason why I'm going off on this massive tangent here is because at the end of the day, when we remember that we come from the same source, and we remember that it's all a temporary expression, an experiment, then we know that we are all God. And that's really hard for a lot of people to realize. It's so hard, in fact, that we kind of don't want to know. Because if we're God, it means we have to start taking responsibility for what we do, for our thoughts, our actions. And Do we really want to do that? No, it's been thousands of years that I've been playing this part of the victim and the worshipper. There's no way I'm going to give it up, you know? But maybe the suffering becomes so bad at one point that you say, okay, I'm so used to this suffering. It's been so many thousands of years that I've done this. I'm over it. I want to know what it's like to not suffer and to be empowered and to understand that I am a creative little God expressed right now here. And that journey from that suffering place to this empowered place is quite a hard journey. And it seems that on planet Earth, this is what we're going through right now. People are waking up and people are knowing and realizing they have to start to take responsibility for their thoughts. You know, I can no longer blame you, and you for everything that's happening to me. No, I am able to create my own reality. And that's why I'm sharing this with you. I'm sharing this because I want us to be empowered again. And whether you choose to or not, that's fine. But my wish is that we may come back to this realization of who we are and eventually go back to source.
Ask a question and know that it will be answered. You know, but you have to release. You can't just say, well, hang on, here's the question. Well, give me the answer, I want it right now. You have to ask the question and then just let it go.
We're at a point of conscious evolution at a level never been seen before.
You know, we are in a unique period right now. It's almost like the evolutionary process has accelerated exponentially in the last few years.
The frequency of the Earth itself and the solar system, but the Earth itself is moving to a higher frequency. And those that are attracted here from now on have to have a higher frequency than those that could come here before. There is no point where humanity and each individual isn't peaking on their spiritual path. They always are. So we're exactly where we're meant to be.
How can I take a chip off that block, take a chisel to it, knock off a piece, and be able to carry that one little piece?
If you stand up and want to be active, it's fantastic because you can actually have a national voice. You know, you can become powerful just through your own motivation. And that's what we're doing in this district, and that's what that Earth House is on the way to becoming, a very strong player.
Nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. I don't have the power to punish the powerful.
But you have the power to play your card.
Yeah, exactly. And it takes 7 people, apparently, statistically, to tell you the exact same thing that contradicts your previously held beliefs for you to actually want to change those beliefs.
Never let it be said that a small group of committed people cannot change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has.
We've got to be guardians of our world.
What it takes is me to step, you to step, you to step beyond your little world, your needs-based me, give me mine gratification and make a contribution. Whatever is your passion.
Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Follow your truth.
The thing is, what is like even a chance of making a difference in this world?
Okay, so my answer to that question is everyone's making a difference. Every single person on the planet's making a difference. It just depends on what you choose to do. I chose this medium